I feel like I look like a fortune teller today, especially whilst holding my coffee. Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode of Toxic Crime Tuesdays. So if you're new to my channel, my name is Shannon, and every single week I speak about a true crime case that has inspired me to speak out and share with you all. So this week's case is an incredibly, possibly along with the Sylvia Likens case, is possibly the most saddest and most vile cases that I have ever researched. I come across this case about a year ago. I just fell down a bit of a rabbit hole and I come across this case and I had to find out more and I thoroughly researched it, and I never really wanted to cover it previously because it is so upsetting and the circumstances around it and why it happened just seem completely unnecessary. And I think when you guys watch this, you will feel exactly the same as me. So be prepared. It is incredibly sad. This case focuses on a wonderful, vivacious, and really intelligent 12-year-old girl named Shanda Sharer. Shanda was the kind of girl who would bring joy to everyone around her. She was incredibly sensitive, but also a force to be reckoned with. Shanda was like a mother hen to all of her friends. She was incredibly protective of her friends. And one particular story that really stood out to me, and I feel is just a complete testament to the kind of person that Shanda was, is that one Halloween, Shanda and her friend were going trick-or-treating and a boy from their school actually threw a water balloon at Shanda's friend and completely drenching her sweets. So her friend was quite upset, you know, she'd spent all evening collecting all this candy and now it had just all been absolutely ruined. So Shanda was like, right, I'm going to sort this out. So she marched to this boy's house, knocked on the door, spoke to the boy's mum, told her what her son had done and said, you owe us a new bag of candy, and then walked away. Which I just think is amazing. Like, I think she was about 10 at the time, you know, she was only young and she was just so incredibly sweet and protective of her friends, and she never wanted to see her friends upset. And Shanda was also the kind of girl that she would just feel so anxious and so upset and would constantly overthink things. If she felt like one of her friends were mad at her, she would just sit up all night worrying about it, and she would feel like she would have to do everything she could in order to make it right. She was incredibly sensitive. Shanda was adored by many. Like I said, she brought joy to everyone around her. You will see in the pictures that we'll put up in this video that Shanda just always had such a big smile on her face. She was absolutely beautiful. She had a beautiful smile. So anytime Shanda would walk into a room, everyone would just smile as well. However, not everyone felt this way about Shanda. There was a particular girl who did not feel this way about Shanda. In fact, she felt the complete opposite. This girl was incredibly jealous and resentful of Shanda, so much so that this girl wanted Shanda dead. And on January the 10th, 1992, she made sure that happened. So just before we get into the case, I just want to say that if, like me, you are a desktop detective, then please consider subscribing to my channel. Maybe turn on your notifications so that you're notified every time I upload a video. Maybe share this video if you think it's worthy of sharing. Put a nice little comment down below and maybe like the video if you enjoy it. So, as always, in order to understand the full history of everything that happens, we need to go right back to the beginning. And I do not want, because this story really does touch me in a lot of ways, I don't want to just remember what happened to Shanda. I don't want us to all remember her death and to only take that away from this video. I want us to remember everything about Shanda. Her murder does not define who she was. Her personality, the way people felt about her, the the way that she treated others, how well she did in school, how much she loved her family. Those are the kinds of things that I want us all to remember and to take away from this story. So as always, we need to go right back to the beginning. So let's dive in. Shanda Renee Sharer was born on June the 6th, 1979. She was born to Jackie Vault, I think that's how you say her name, and Stephen Sharer. Shanda actually had a half sister who was, I think she was 7 years old. Trying to do the math in my head. She was 7 years older than her, and Jackie actually had Paige through a previous relationship. So Stephen, Shanda's father, and Jackie, they actually knew each other in high school. Stephen always remembered that he had such a huge crush on Jackie. He always thought that Jackie was just completely different to all of the other girls within his school. She was the new kid on the block. She had just moved to that area because her parents had recently divorced. And Stephen just remembered how beautiful and confident and funny and just vivacious, much like Shanda. And Stephen just had the biggest crush on her. However, Jackie didn't really feel the same at this time, and Jackie actually began dating Stephen's best friend, Michael. So Jackie and Michael become high school sweethearts. They were absolutely infatuated with each other. And when Jackie was 19, they were already married and they welcomed their first child, which was Paige, Shanda's older sister. The marriage didn't, however, last for very long. I don't think there was anything major in the relationship. I think they just grew apart and realised that they just weren't right for each other anymore. So they ended up getting divorced very quickly, and Jackie was now a single mother at just 19 years of age. So Jackie was finding herself really struggling at this point. You know, she was very young and she was having to do it all on her own. Michael, I think he just kind of vanished and was never really in the picture. So I can imagine that it must have been really hard for Jackie at that time. However, a few years later, Jackie and Stephen actually reconnected. They, I don't know how, but they got in contact and they soon began dating. However, Stephen didn't live in the same town as Jackie. He lived pretty far away in Middlesbrough. So Jackie and Stephen began a long distance relationship. But then after a while, they decided they didn't want to put off the inevitable any longer. So they wanted to get married. And Jackie and Paige moved in with Stephen into his home in Middlesbrough. Stephen was doing very well at this point. He had a really good job, so they were all living very comfortably. Stephen had a really nice, spacious home, and he could provide Paige and Jackie with everything that they needed, and he treated Paige like his own daughter. And Paige even says to this day that Stephen's the only father that Paige has ever really known. So their new life together seemed to just be picture perfect. It seemed to be everything that all three of them had wanted. Jackie just wanted a loving, stable home. She wanted a partner to share all of these experiences with. She wanted a father figure in Paige's life, and Stephen wanted the same, and Paige wanted the exact same as well. So it just seemed to be everything that they wanted, and they were all thriving. Their lives improved even more so when Shanda was born. Stephen and Jackie welcomed their very first child together, and they were both absolutely elated to be welcoming their first child. They felt like their family unit was complete, and they just thought things were just going to go swimmingly from there on. But then the family decided to move from Kentucky to Indiana to be closer to Jackie's family, because she was getting really homesick. She was missing her family. And, you know, she had 2 young kids at home, and she just wanted more, like a bigger support network around her, which I completely understand. Like, I live about 300 miles away from all of my family. I think I have 2 family members here. And so I don't have much of a family, like a support network at all. And it has been incredibly hard. Thankfully, I have a really supportive partner and he is absolutely amazing. But there are times when I would just want my mum to be here and or my nan or my dad. Like there's times when I'd want to just pop round and see them rather than having to ring them. So yeah, I can totally empathise with that. However, this move didn't prove to be as great as they first thought it was going to be. The cracks began to show between Jackie and Stephen's relationship. They began having a lot of financial issues, which I think Stephen wasn't doing so well in his job. He wasn't making as much money, and as we all know, in every relationship, financial issues can cause a myriad of arguments. So it did begin to take its toll on their relationship. When Shanda was just 3 years old, Jackie and Stephen actually decided to divorce. But after just a few months, Jackie and Stephen decided to reconcile. They decided to try and give it another go for the sake of the girls. However, after about just over a year, they just could not make it work any longer. They just felt like they was not right for each other. But Jackie and Stephen, they parted amicably. They just knew that they weren't right for each other. It wasn't anything major. There was no kind of abuse or anything like that going on. They wanted the best for their children, and they decided that the best thing to do was to part ways and to co-parent and to just remain friends. And that's exactly what they did. Jackie got full custody of Paige and Shanda, but Stephen would have both of them on the weekends, which I just think is amazing, because it just goes to show that he always viewed Paige as a daughter. He didn't just view her as part of the package just because he was with Jackie, that Paige was part of the deal and that he had to be in this fatherly role. But as soon as they broke up, then he wouldn't have to any longer. But he did. He wanted to. He wanted to very much so be a huge part in Paige's life, and that's exactly what he did. And I have nothing but praise for that. Stephen, to me, seemed like he was a really great father, and Jackie as well. She seemed to be a fantastic mother. So I have nothing but admiration for the both of them. So as a child, Shanda was so fiercely independent. She was just such a strong-willed character. She would just want to do everything by herself, and if there was some particular thing that she couldn't do, she would get really angry that she couldn't do it, and she was always so desperate to grow up. I remember being the exact same when I was younger. I was always so desperate to be older, and now I'm a grown adult. It's not that fun, and all I want to do is be a child again. So kids, well, I hope you're not watching, but if you're being a bit sneaky and you are watching, just enjoy being a kid. Don't wish your life away and wish to be an adult, because it's really not that fun out here. So when Shanda was just 7 years old, Jackie met a man named Ronnie Ott, and they both worked at, it was like a racetrack called Churchill Downs, and I'm not too sure what Jackie did. I don't know if she, well, yeah, I don't want to speculate. I don't know. I'm not too sure what Jackie did, but she worked there. But Ronnie was the clerk at the track, and he earned a lot of money through it, and he also had 2 pensions. So he had a big house, he had a really nice car, he had a lot of money, and he was living very comfortably, and he could offer Jackie the life that she'd never really had. I don't think Jackie was a materialistic person, but having someone there that is willing to spend a bit of money on you and show you the good life, like, I don't see the problem in that. Why not? Why would you not embrace that? And that's what Ronnie did. He would take her on dates. He would take her to some really lavish restaurants. He would always come round and shower Jackie and both girls with really luxurious gifts, and they all loved it. After a little while of dating, Ronnie actually suggested that Jackie and her 2 daughters move into his very lavish, spacious home in Louisville in Kentucky, which Jackie happily accepted. And so did the girls. They were very happy about this. They really took to Ronnie. And shortly afterwards, the two were married. So whilst they were living in Louisville and living in Ronnie's home, Shanda was attending St. Paul's Catholic School, which I believe is a private school. But I did look it up, and it did say it was a private school, but there was a lot of St. Paul's Catholic schools, and I'm pretty sure it was this particular one. But yeah, there was a lot that was coming up. But this is the one that I saw, and it did say that it was in Louisville, Kentucky, but I don't know if there's a few. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a private school. And due to it being a private school as well, it was very small, very tight-knit. There wasn't many children in Shanda's class, and she was absolutely thriving. All of her teachers adored Shanda, and all of her classmates as well. She was just such a friendly, happy kid. Whilst in school, Shanda was extremely popular, and as well as being academically smart, she was also incredibly active. She enjoyed a lot of outdoor activities. Shanda was part of the volleyball team, the softball team, and a cheerleading team, which is a lot. It's a lot to do, but she absolutely enjoyed and flourished at all of it. So after just being married for 4 years, the marriage between Ronnie and Jackie soon crumbled. I think Jackie always had a bit of a, this isn't right kind of feeling. However, I think she just always pushed it to the back of her mind, because she knew, like, this guy he's got a good job, he's really good with the girls, he's good to me, he's very loving. But towards the end of the relationship, I think Ronnie sensed that Jackie was sort of pulling away, and he did become incredibly jealous and possessive. He was never physical, but he did get very jealous and was incredibly controlling, and was always accusing Jackie of having an affair. So she knew, like, look, I need to get out of this. My daughters cannot be a part of this dynamic. So she took the girls and she moved. And this is when, no, she took Shanda, because Paige had already moved out at this point. Paige had actually moved to New Albany, which is where Shanda and Jackie go to move. They moved to New Albany in Kentucky. No, they moved to New Albany in Indiana, which is literally just over the water which is just over the river from Louisville. So it's not actually too far away. And they moved to New Albany, and they moved into this really lovely townhouse, and it was actually just across the street from Shanda's sister Paige. Paige had lived in this home with Jackie's sister. So Shanda was incredibly excited to be living with just her and her mum. They were more like best friends than anything else, and she kept saying, like, I'm so excited for it to just be me and you, to live in our house. And she also loved the fact that her auntie and her sister lived just over the road. And also Shanda's father, Stephen, he only lived about 7 miles away. So that was really good as well. And New Albany was just a beautiful suburban town with, like, picturesque views and, like, a really homely feel. You know, those kind of white houses with white picket fences, and it just seemed to be a perfect new start for both Shanda and Jackie. But little did they know about the true sinister events that would ultimately take place. So Shanda's father, Stephen, lived in Jeffersonville, which is 7 miles away. He lived with his new wife named Sharon and her 2 children. Shanda absolutely loved her new stepmother. She really got along with her really, really well. And she also loved her new step-siblings. She would love going around there every single weekend. And anytime Stephen and Sharon's friends met Shanda, they would always say to them, like, wow, you have such a well-mannered and polite daughter. She is just incredible. And she was just so kind, so sweet, and just wouldn't hurt anybody. She would do anything for anyone, and she would just do anything in her power to put a smile on someone's face. She just seemed desperate for others around her to be happy. So Jackie was growing increasingly worried about taking Shanda out of her previous school and now enrolling her in a public school. which is much closer to their new home. Obviously, this made sense proximity-wise because the previous school, it was a lot further away and the commute just would have been too much for Shanda. So it made a lot more sense to enroll Shanda in a new school. However, she couldn't enroll her in a private school because it wasn't cost effective. So Jackie decided to enroll Shanda in a public school. But Jackie was quite worried about this because Shanda's previous school, like I said, was really small. There wasn't that many students overall. But in this public school, it was huge. And she did worry about just Shanda's life in this new school, like if she'd make friends, if she'd get on well with the teachers, if she'd actually do well academically in this school. So this did, of course, make Jackie very nervous about Shanda transitioning into this new school dynamic. But Jackie also knew her daughter. She knew how well adjusted Shanda was and just how kind and friendly she was. So she kind of talked herself out of this anxiousness. But I think as a parent, with any situation, like any kind of new situation that your child is going into, you're always going to have some sense of concern, which is completely normal. So on the night before Shanda was due to start her new school, Shanda was actually growing quite anxious as well, which I think is normal when you're starting your first day at any school. Obviously, it is incredibly scary. I remember when it was the night before I started at main school. I was absolutely shitting myself. And like, even though I knew other kids that were going to this school, I already had like my friendship group and stuff, you're still quite worried because it's a completely unfamiliar situation. You don't know what the other kids are going to be like, what the school dynamic is going to be like, what the teachers are going to be like, how hard the lessons are going to be. It is really scary. So I totally get that, and I feel for any kid when it comes to starting a new school. It's just horrendous, and I'm just going to be a bundle of nerves when my child eventually goes to school. And she actually spent hours trying to find the perfect outfit because Shanda had never had to worry about this before. With Shanda's previous school, they had uniforms, but now with this school, they didn't. So she was just rushing around her room, trying on every single outfit in her wardrobe, performing a little catwalk in front of her mirror and her mum, just trying to find the perfect outfit. And later that night, she actually expressed her concerns to her mum and said, like, Mum, what if they don't like me? What if none of the kids like me? Like, what am I going to do? So even though Jackie was feeling just as anxious, she didn't want to let that be known to her daughter, because obviously if Jackie had let this be known to her, then Shanda would have become even more anxious than she already was. So Jackie just did what any normal good mum would do and just said to her, of course they will like you. You're amazing, and of course you will have friends. Now don't think about it any longer. Get a good night's rest so that you are feeling fresh and alert for your first day of school. And then shortly afterwards, Shanda went to sleep, and then she woke up the next day feeling all refreshed and ready for her first day of school. So during the day, Jackie was feeling like a bag of nerves all day, just pacing around, constantly worrying about whether Shanda had a good day at school or not. And then all these worries soon washed away as soon as Shanda walked in with a huge smile on her face. And she said to her mum, like, Mum, I had such a good day at school today. I love my teachers. I even made some new friends. It's just a really great place. I think we're going to be really happy here. And Jackie just felt so happy and so relieved to hear that. However, just 2 days later, Jackie would get a phone call from Hazel. I don't think I actually even named the school that Shanda went to. It's called Hazelwood High School. So Jackie got a phone call from Hazelwood's head teacher, and he had said to Jackie that basically Shanda had gotten into an altercation that day with another student, and that she would have to have a week of in-school detention. And Jackie was just completely confused by this. She was like, what? This doesn't sound like my daughter. Like, she knew her daughter. She knew what Shanda was like. Yes, she was really chatty. She was very outgoing and bubbly. Maybe she could have got in trouble for talking over a teacher in class, but never would she have got into a violent altercation with another child, so with another student. So Jackie was like really confused about this, but she thought, that I'm not going to get angry, I'm not going to shout or anything until I know exactly what's happened, because Jackie knew Shanda, and she knew that she was incredibly trustworthy and she could rely on her daughter to tell her the truth. So she waited patiently until Shanda come home, and she asked Shanda exactly what had happened. And that's when Shanda said that she was at school and she'd just made this new friend, and her new friend had expressed to her that she wanted to break up with her boyfriend, and she just didn't know how to do it because she felt like he just wouldn't accept it. She also had a piece of jewellery. I can't remember if it's a bracelet or a ring or a necklace. I'll just say piece of jewellery. So she had this piece of jewellery from her boyfriend, and she wanted to give it back to him, but she knew he wouldn't accept it. So Shanda said, okay, I'll do it. You know, she wanted to prove herself to her new friend. She wanted to prove that she could be a good friend. So she said she'd do it. So she went up to this boy and she said, look, I'm just giving this back to you. She doesn't want it anymore. And he wouldn't accept it. And he kept saying, no, I don't want it. And then it kind of got into a bit of an argument. Like, Shanda kept trying to shove it in his face and like give it to him and just be like, look, take it. But he just wouldn't have it. And then suddenly, because their voices started raising, you know what kids are like, they were all grouping around him and all like, fight, 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 and just, you know, causing a scene. And that's when someone actually walked from out of the crowd in between this boy and Shanda, and she revealed herself to be this boy's cousin, and her name was Amanda Heavram. So then Amanda starts shouting and having a go at Shanda, and then she shoves her into a locker, and then they start getting into quite a bit. Well, they start getting into a fight, but I don't think Shanda really fought back much. I think she kind of just pushed and shoved her and, you know, sort of tried to get her off her. But Amanda was kicking her, hitting her, pushing her. And Shanda actually had quite a few bruises and marks from this, which Jackie saw as soon as Shanda walked in the door. And she was just absolutely distraught when she saw what Shanda's face looked like. It was awful. And I can imagine like that must be horrendous to see that your child had been hurt by someone else. So Jackie, upon hearing this, you know, she trusts her daughter. She knows that she's telling her the truth. She knows exactly what she's like. She knows that this is something that definitely would have happened. She knew that Shanda would try to be a good friend and do that to help someone out. And, you know, that is just the kind of scenario that unfortunately could easily have happened to Shanda. Jackie decided, like, you know, she didn't want to be too harsh on her because she understood the situation, but she felt like there had to be some kind of repercussions. So she was grounded for a little while, and obviously Shanda then had to go to detention, and she had to be in detention all week, where she would be completely isolated from the rest of the school other than Amanda Heavram. So her and Amanda were in detention, and this is when they grew a bit of a bond. They started to really get along and really actually like each other, and they started hanging out quite regularly. But Jackie was not very happy about this. So Amanda was a pretty troubled kid. She was a couple of years older than Shanda, and she had gotten into quite a few fights at school. And Amanda, I don't want this to sound stereotypical or sound like I'm being judgmental or ignorant, because these are not my words, but Amanda to Jackie just looked like trouble, and because she dressed differently to the other kids in school. Amanda had very short hair, pretty much like a pixie cut, and she dressed in baggy clothes. She'd wear sort of like checkered shirts and long baggy tops, baggy jeans, and she dressed like a boy. Not my words. So Jackie was quite unsettled about this newfound friendship between Shanda and Amanda, especially considering how they'd previously met. So I do get that. Jackie judged Amanda a lot based on her appearance, which I don't think is right. However, this was 1992, so we do need to remember that. Even though it wasn't that long ago, it was still a very different time. People weren't as open as they are now, even though there is still a lot of prejudice prejudice and a lot of judgments towards people that don't dress to their specific gender norms. There's still a lot of judgment, and there shouldn't be. And Amanda did have quite a troubled background. Her mum left when she was very young, and it was just her other sibling, and her dad, Jerry. And her dad, he was quite old-fashioned. He was very judgmental, and he would often judge Amanda based on her appearance as well. And he would often ask Amanda if she was a lesbian, to which Amanda said no, and that she had a boyfriend in school, which she didn't. Amanda was actually dating another student, 16-year-old Melinda Lovelace. Now remember that name, because Melinda is a huge part in this story. Melinda, like Amanda, also had a very troubled background. However, Melinda's was a lot more sinister than Amanda's. Melinda come from quite a poor family. She had two older sisters, and her father, Jerry, and her mother, Marge. Now, they had quite a torturous relationship. Jerry was very aggressive, very physical, and he often abused all of his daughters, both physically and sexually. However, none of the daughters have actually come forward and confirmed this, but it has been stated a lot that this had occurred. Melinda's father was not a nice person at all. I've just realised that I've just said that his name was Jerry. It wasn't, it was Larry. Yeah, so Larry. He was not a nice person whatsoever. He actually was previously a police officer, but he only worked as a police officer for 8 months until he was fired for beating up a black man. Apparently, Larry was a very racist person. But he claimed that the only reason he beat this man up is because he slept with his wife, which is also quite strange because Larry coerced his wife into sleeping with other people. He kind of manipulated Marge into believing that in order to keep their relationship and to keep it interesting and to keep the fire still burning, they needed to sleep with other people. And he would often try to persuade her to sleep with other men whilst he watched. And Marjorie never wanted to do this. She was very much against it, but she felt trapped and felt like she needed to do so in order to keep her family together. So Marjorie would comply and she would sleep with these men. And Marjorie actually ended up trying to commit suicide numerous times. I think one time was just after having, it was either a threesome or an orgy with her husband and other people, and she tried to commit suicide straight after because she just felt so horrendous and felt like she didn't want to live, which I just think is incredibly sad. I know that there are couples that are swingers, and that's absolutely fine if that's what you want to do, if that's what you both want to do equally, that's absolutely fine. But if the other person in that relationship doesn't want to do that, do not force them to do that. If you want to, then leave that relationship and find someone else who is into the same thing. Don't persuade your partner and guilt trip them into being interested in the same thing sexually as you. I just think that is so wrong, so manipulative, and just so narcissistic, and it just angers me so much. So it took a toll on the entire family. Obviously, all three girls, they all knew what was going on. They knew how their father was. They knew how manipulative and abusive he was towards his wife and towards them. And they could see how much the relationship was taking its toll on their mother. And they knew that she had tried to commit suicide so many times. They knew how depressed she was. There was so many times when Marjorie just couldn't get out of bed, where she would spend days in bed. She wouldn't even feel like she could get up and brush her hair or brush her teeth. And they are some of the major signs of depression. When I was suffering with depression, there was days when I was literally just in bed. I couldn't do anything. You feel like you can't even do the most basic things, such as eating, drinking, brushing your teeth, brushing your hair. You feel like it's too much effort and you feel so overwhelmed, and just going to brush your teeth or brush your hair is such a huge accomplishment in itself, and it's just incredibly sad. And unless you've gone through that, you won't fully understand how hard it is to be in that situation or to feel that way. It is just I wouldn't ever want anyone to experience that, but unfortunately so many people have, and it's just sad. So back to Shanda and Amanda. So Shanda and Amanda, they grew really, really close. They were literally spending every single day together. They were spending, they'd spend their lunches together in school. They'd hang out during school after classes, and they would hang out after school as well. And Melinda did not like this. She knew that Shanda was just absolutely beautiful. Not only was she beautiful, Melinda was also, she was incredibly stunning. However, Shanda had a lot that Melinda didn't have, and that was her personality. Melinda was not a nice person. She was manipulative, narcissistic, very much like her father, and she was just not a nice person to be around. But Shanda was. Shanda was just incredible. She was incredibly kind. She would do anything for anyone. She was smart. She was funny. She was charismatic, energetic, vivacious. She was just such a joy to be around. And Melinda wasn't like that. She didn't have the charisma like that Shanda did. And I think that's what got to her even more, that she couldn't offer Amanda what Shanda could. And she could see that Amanda was pulling away and gravitating towards Shanda. And this just intensified all the angst and anger and jealousy inside of Melinda. So Melinda was very promiscuous in school. It is known that she had slept with a lot of people, a lot of different boys, a lot of different girls. It may be because of what was going on at home. And I think she had a bit of an identity crisis. She didn't really know who she was sexually attracted to. But for me personally, I don't want it to come across that way, but for me personally, I think you're just attracted to a person. I don't think gender really matters. But I think at that time for Melinda, she was very confused. She didn't really know what she wanted or who she wanted. And it is alleged that the reason why Melinda was so attracted to Amanda was because she very much reminded her of her father. And Melinda did have a lot of issues with her father. Like, he had caused so much hurt within the family. He had beaten their mother numerous occasions. One occasion actually resulted in Marjorie ending up in the hospital, and that was because she didn't want Larry going home with 2 other women. And another time, Larry actually raped Marjorie because she wouldn't have sex with him, so he just forced himself on her in front of all 3 girls. However, Melinda had a very close relationship with her father. No matter any of the hurt that he had caused, she still adored her father and looked up to him. And this is very common in these kind of family dynamics when a parent is incredibly abusive to their child. It can make them more eager for their love and attention because they're not getting it from them. All they're getting is constant abuse. So all they're wanting to do is just get that little bit of love. So it may seem like they love and adore that parent even more, but it's not. It's just such an unhealthy dynamic. So Melinda was obviously going through a lot. There is absolutely no disputing that. However, what goes on to happen, there is no justification for what Melinda went through in her childhood. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm justifying it at all. But like I've said in my previous videos, I'm sure as human beings, we can empathise. So Amanda would often talk about Shanda to Melinda, which absolutely infuriated Melinda. And often in school, when Melinda would go to approach Amanda to go and obviously speak to her because, it's her girlfriend, she would always be with Shanda, which naturally would piss you off. I think with anyone, you're dating someone and then they suddenly strike up this friendship with someone that they previously hated, and it seemed like it could be a little bit more, so that can come across as really threatening. And I can imagine being jealous in that situation. But to Melinda, this jealousy just transpired into so much more, and she had so much hatred towards Shanda, so much so that she wanted Shanda gone. And she would often express this to all of her friends. She would always talk about how she wanted Shanda gone, how she wanted her dead. And her friends would kind of just be like, oh, okay, Melinda, whatever. Like, they wouldn't take it seriously because they kind of knew what Melinda was like. And they knew that she was quite an angry, aggressive girl. And she would kind of just speak like that anyway. But that they had no idea how much she actually hated Shanda and the length she would go to make Shanda disappear. One day, Amanda actually expressed to Melinda that she thought that Shanda was cute. And upon hearing this, Melinda was so angry and she actually forbade Amanda to ever speak to Shanda again. Amanda did not take this lightly at all. She didn't want to stop talking to Shanda. And they actually began writing letters to each other. And these letters started becoming quite explicit, like sexually explicit. And it became abundantly clear that they were having some kind of affair. And one day Melinda actually come across these letters, and then she started writing letters to Shanda, threatening her and telling her to back off and to leave Amanda alone. Otherwise, she'll regret it. So Melinda was she was a volcano ready to erupt. She was just getting more and more angry, and her hatred was just growing for Shanda by the day. During this time, Amanda and Shanda's relationship was intensifying, and they made sure that they would keep it away from Melinda and that she would not know at all. So they continued writing notes to each other in secret, and Amanda would often visit Shanda at her home. But it would always be when Shanda's mother, Jackie, was at work. And then there was one particular day when Jackie actually turned up and she saw Shanda and someone else sitting on a porch and they were kissing. And Jackie confronted her daughter and she was like, who was that? And that's when Shanda called to Amanda, who was hiding in the bushes, and said, it's okay, you can come out now. And Jackie said she was absolutely stunned and she was not overly happy about this. She said she wasn't overly happy about Amanda's appearance and she was quite disturbed by it, but she said that she, tried to keep that secret. And that's when she said to Shanda, like, look, you two can carry on seeing each other at the townhouse as long as I'm there. You can't do it when I'm at work. So Shanda and Amanda, they agreed. They said that's absolutely fine. One night, Amanda and Shanda decided to spend the night together. So Shanda actually stayed at Amanda's home and they had shared notes expressing that they wanted to make love. So that's what they did. I'm not air quoting it because lesbians can't make love or anything like that, so please don't think it's just, they're not my words and that's not what I would say, so that's why I'm just doing the air quotes. Yeah, it is believed that that's what they did, that they had sex that evening, but the next day it's quite clear that Shanda sort of had mixed feelings about it, because Amanda actually wrote a note to Shanda basically asking why she was acting so strange afterwards. So yeah, it seemed quite clear that Shanda just felt a bit weird about it, which is kind of understandable. It's, a completely new experience, even if it's, whether it's sex with someone of the same sex or the opposite sex for the first time is weird. It's awkward. You do feel kind of strange afterwards because you're a bit like, what the hell was that? What happened? So that is totally normal, I guess. And, Amanda was a lot more sexually experienced. Shanda wasn't. So yeah, that's totally understandable. But one thing we need to remember is Shanda was 12. Amanda was 15 at this point. She was 14 when the two had met, but she turned 15 in September, and this happened after September. So she was 15. Yes, they were both under the age of 18, but there is a significant age difference there, so I think we need to be mindful of that. Shanda was still just a child. So one of the notes after, the first sexual experience between the two actually said, I had a great time with you last night and I can't wait for more. Please don't cry again. I hope you're okay. And Shanda wrote back saying, I loved last night too, and I want more always. I want what we had last night. During this time, Melinda and Amanda are still together. So Amanda is always reassuring Melinda. She's just a friend. Shanda's just a friend. There's nothing going on. But Melinda knew, like, she wasn't stupid, and I think you would kind of know. And I think she caught on. She knew that there was something not quite right, and she just did not know what to do at this point. She tried to stop the friendship between the two, but she knew that no matter what, she couldn't. Amanda was just drawn to Shanda, and she knew that the only way she could get Shanda out of the picture was to physically remove her from that situation. One day, this just all got too much for Melinda. Anytime she was with Amanda, she would either be talking about Shanda, she would be ringing Shanda, or she would be physically next to Shanda. And Melinda did not like this. She did not want this to continue. And she was just getting more and more angry. So one day she approached Shanda in the hallway of the school and she physically threatened Shanda. Shanda was absolutely petrified. She didn't want to get beaten up. And Melinda was 16 at this time. You know, she was quite a lot older than her. And she knew Melinda's reputation. She knew she was aggressive. She was confrontational. She got into numerous fights previously. Shanda was absolutely not like that. She was the other end of the spectrum. She didn't get into fights. She didn't like physical altercations. So she just sort of backed off and she said, like, look, okay, I'm going to back off. I'm not going to talk to Amanda anymore. After this, Melinda, for some reason, goes into Amanda's locker and she finds like a paper love heart and it says Shanda loves Amanda. So Melinda grabs this, she goes straight up to Shanda, shoves it in her face and is like, why did you write this? Why are you not listening to me? Why are you not leaving her alone? And Shanda completely denies it, says that's not even my handwriting, I really did not write that. And I think she was telling the truth. I don't know if maybe Amanda wrote it. I don't know. Maybe Melinda did because she just wanted to cause more of a scene. I have no idea. So yeah, and then she's like, look, why are you not listening to me? And then she actually grabs Shanda's hair, she pulls on her hair, she gets all in her face and like shoves her and repeats what she said previously. It's like, back off, leave Amanda alone, otherwise you will regret it. After this, Shanda backed off. She didn't want this to continue happening. She didn't want this horrible love triangle. She really did care for Amanda, but she didn't want to be living in constant fear and worrying about getting threats and getting beaten up in the hallway. So she did. She backed off and she left Amanda alone. She stopped writing notes to her. She stopped seeing her, and that was it. But it wasn't it for Amanda. Amanda continued to write notes. One particular one was saying that she felt so sad about what was going on and that she loved and cared for both Shanda and Melinda and she didn't want to have to choose. And then there was another note where she said that Shanda's butt looked really good, and then she even wrote a note asking Shanda to go to the school disco with her, which Shanda didn't respond to any of them. And it was like Amanda was just adding fuel to the fire. I don't know whether Amanda just enjoyed the attention that she was getting from both girls and the fact that she was like in the middle and she had two girls fighting over her, two very beautiful girls. So I don't know. Or I don't know if maybe she did mutually love them both and she just couldn't choose. I have absolutely no idea what was going on in Amanda's head at that time. So eventually, Shanda agrees to go to the school dance with Amanda because Amanda reassures Shanda that Melinda will not be there because Melinda never went to school dances. She would rather hang out with her friends and drink wine with them at their house or at a park, whatever kids do these days at 16. Not these days, those days at 16. So yeah, she was not going to be there, so Shanda did not need to worry about that. So Shanda and Amanda attended the school dance, whilst Melinda was with her friend Kerry, and they were drinking. After a few drinks, Melinda started crying, getting really emotional, and saying to her friend that she felt like she was losing Amanda to Shanda. And then she convinces her friend to drive her to the school dance so that she could basically confirm her worst fears. And they go to the school dance and they sit in the car park and they wait in the car and they wait for everyone else to leave. And then Melinda spots Amanda and Shanda walking out of the school dance together. Melinda confronts Amanda, and this time her frustrations are directed towards Amanda more so than Shanda. She felt completely betrayed by Amanda at this point. She knew she'd gone against her. Like, she knew that Shanda had actually backed down at this point, so she had to direct her anger towards Amanda because Shanda wasn't really doing anything wrong. She had tried to back off, but Amanda just persevered. So she was fuming at Amanda. So Melinda actually slapped Amanda straight around the face, screaming and shouting at her and just causing an absolute scene. However, after this, Amanda and Melinda decide to give it one last try. They decide they're going to try and make this work, this whole dynamic. They're just going to move on from everything that's happened and try to make this work. Obviously, that's going to all work out, isn't it? No. Melinda actually made Amanda promise that she was not to see Shanda unless they were together, unless Amanda and Melinda were together. Amanda wasn't allowed to see Shanda on her own. But then a couple of days later, Melinda spotted Amanda and Shanda together at school. So Amanda just doesn't learn. So obviously this is just going to be an absolute shit show. This is when Melinda realises she's lost. And to be honest, all of this whole situation, the main person to blame on all of this is Amanda, because she knew she had two girls that were both really attracted to her and really did care and love her, and she was just playing them off against each other. She was just thriving off of the attention. She knew that Melinda was going stir crazy with jealousy and anger. Amanda was just adding fuel to the fire. No matter what Melinda did or said, she was just antagonising her more and more, rather than just leaving and saying, look, Melinda, I'm sorry, I want to be with Shanda, or vice versa, Shanda, I want to be with Melinda. She wouldn't do that. She just kept playing them off against each other, and she was just stirring the pot and just making this whole situation so much more worse when she could have easily have resolved it. She was the only person really that could have ultimately of solve this particular solution. I don't mean later on when we get into what, all the horrible stuff. I'm not talking about that. I just mean this particular situation with the love triangle. Amanda could have stopped it and she didn't. And I do empathise with Melinda a bit in this situation. She should have just walked away, but she obviously really did love Amanda and she didn't want to walk away, and so she continued to let Amanda just walk all over her and basically laugh in her face while she was just hanging out and being with Shanda. And Shanda should have walked away as well, but I think Shanda was so desperate to fit into this new school, and she didn't have a huge group of friends at this school. She did have friends, but I think she felt like Amanda was the only person that she really connected with on a deeper level, and she really did care for Amanda. And I think she was just feeling a bit lost in this new school, this new area, and she just wanted to keep Amanda around, which I do understand that. So Amanda should have done something about it, and I do think she's the one to blame within this situation. So Melinda and Amanda broke up at this point, and she was like, look, I'm out, I can't do this anymore. So then Melinda started dating someone else. Melinda's two older sisters, Melissa and Michelle, they were both lesbians as well, and they had a mutual friend, and they actually introduced this friend. This friend is also called Kerry, which isn't the same Kerry that I spoke about previously. She introduced her to Melinda, and her and Melinda started dating. And I think it was mainly just a rebound for Melinda. She just kind of wanted just to make Amanda jealous. Melinda's plan had worked. Amanda did work. Once she found out about this Kerry girl, she was really upset and really jealous. And then she actually started ringing up this Kerry girl and like harassing her and giving her abuse. And then she started ringing Melinda as well and saying to Melinda that, we just have such a special bond. And then they decided that they were going to break off with their partners and be together, but that's not what Amanda did. Amanda still continued to be with Shanda, but she did say to Shanda, look, we're going to have to keep our relationship a secret, otherwise Melinda will kill you. But then Amanda started getting really jealous and possessive over Shanda, which is weird because she hated that in Melinda. Now she was becoming that. And she would see she would see Shanda with like other boys and like talking with them, and she would write her abusive notes accusing her of flirting with these boys, and yet she would just start to get really jealous and really abusive towards Shanda as well. After a while, Jackie, Shanda's mum, just felt like Amanda was too much of a bad influence on Shanda. Amanda was getting into a lot of trouble in school. She was skipping school, and Jackie found out about this. And even though Shanda wasn't, she just felt like she would drag Shanda down, and she didn't want that. So she actually said to Shanda one day, like, I don't want you seeing Amanda anymore. But Jackie neglected to tell this to Shanda's dad, which obviously Shanda would see him on the weekends, and he didn't live that far away. So Shanda would still see Amanda at her dad's, and her dad and his wife and their kids, they all went away to, I don't know, another town, and Amanda went with them. All while Amanda is seeing Melinda again, but she has told Melinda that her and Shanda are no longer together. So she is lying about where she is every time she's seeing Shanda. But whilst Amanda and Shanda were in this town, I think it was like they attended like this festival with Shanda's family. Someone from school had spotted Amanda and Shanda there and had reported that back to Melinda. And Melinda actually turned around to this friend and said, Shanda will pay for this. Jackie, Stephen and his wife Sharon all agreed that they had noticed a significant change in Shanda. She had stopped making so much effort in her appearance like she had previously. She stopped attending basketball practice. She stopped doing her homework. She wasn't as interested in her academics as she was previously. She used to be like a real bookworm. Like she was always reading. She was always studying. She was a real go-getter. Like she loved to study. She loved to do well in school. But now she just wasn't bothered anymore. And when she was at home, she would literally just sit in her room with the door closed and just lay in bed and just sulk. And this is quite common amongst teenagers. You know, we all go through that kind of phase. But they did all agree that the common denominator was clearly Amanda, and that she was a bad influence on their daughter. So they needed to do something about it. Jackie had also found out when contacting Shanda's school that she was not doing well in school at all. She was failing all of her classes. She was getting into a lot of trouble. She was getting into detention. And when her report card was supposed to be sent home for her mum to sign, Shanda actually learnt to forge the signature and her mother's signature. So that's what she did. So her mother never actually found out about how bad she was doing at school until she actually phoned the school herself. So Jackie, like any good mother, she decided to hire a tutor to come by 3 times a week to help Shanda catch back up with her classes. And she also said that Shanda needed to stop speaking with Amanda, and Shanda actually agreed with this. She was really upset about it, but I think she knew that the relationship wasn't right and she was a bad influence and they needed to end it. So that's what they did. But Amanda did not take this lightly. She continued to harass Shanda. She would call the house. Sometimes she would even call the house and disguise her voice and pretending to be someone else, but Jackie never bought it. She always knew that it was Amanda, and Amanda was just going crazy at this time. She just kept harassing Shanda, just trying to get through to her, but Shanda just wouldn't comply. She knew that she needed to make a change, and she actually said to her mum that the reason why she was keeping Amanda there and why she wouldn't end the friendship, relationship, whatever, and Shanda actually said that she was scared of not having Amanda around because she felt like Amanda was her only protection in the school, because there were girls there that wanted to beat her up. And when her mother asked who, Shanda said Melinda Lovelace. So Jackie actually rang Jerry, Amanda's father, and she basically rang him to say, look, your daughter needs to stop harassing my daughter. And she obviously told him about their relationship, and Stephanie was like, what? my daughter's not a lesbian. She's got a boyfriend. And she's like, no. Well, she's been after my daughter and she will not leave her alone. So can you please just tell her to back off? So Jackie was just like, look, just keep your daughter away from mine. I'll keep my daughter away from yours. Let's just leave it at that. And he was just like, okay, cool. That's what I'll do. But I think he was pretty much in the dark about everything that Amanda did, and he just wasn't really an active participant in Amanda's life. I don't think he was overly bothered about her social life, and yeah, he just wasn't really involved at all. So I doubt he really did much to intervene and to keep Amanda away from Shanda, because it obviously didn't work, because she still didn't leave her alone. So once Jackie had, one day she had come across a letter that that Shanda had wrote to send to Amanda, but she didn't realise that you put a stamp on. You should obviously put a stamp on it. She literally just wrote this note and wrote the address, and tried to post it, and obviously it had been sent back. So Jackie had found it, and it says, I think it said, I really miss you. I miss the touch of your warm body. And I think Jackie always knew that there was something like romantic going on previously. Well, she did, but she didn't know how much it had progressed. And this is when her and Shanda's father, like, they had a phone call and they spoke about it, and they decided to remove Shanda from that school and put her in a different school. And that's exactly what they did. They just wanted to give Shanda a new start. They wanted her to be away from these people, be away from bad influences, and it seemed to be a good idea. It seemed to be something that worked. However, it would all change. Not long after this, Shanda would lose her life. Two parents would lose their little girl forever in the most horrific way possible. So this is part one, and I'm going to leave part one here. Part two will be up in literally just a couple of days. I've had to do it in two parts because this is already so long, and Shanda's death, her murder, everything that happens to her is very detailed. A lot happens to her. She is tortured and murdered in the most horrific way. It is really, really awful and very, very sad. So it's going to take me a while to get through that, and also get through the investigation and everything else. So I'm going to have to end it here. And part two will be uploaded in literally just a couple of days. I will not make you wait too long. So thank you so much if you have been watching. I know I've probably given you a little bit of a teaser. I haven't really, like, it's just, there's a lot to go on. You know, I've said I wanted to give you as much as I can about the life of Shanda, and part two will be, sadly, about the death and the investigation of Shanda Sharer. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in a couple of days. Stay safe, stay spooky. Bye, guys.